They no longer have to register as an NPO. What impact is that going to have?
The registration status is primarily a governance function. There's no need for an ECD program to register for NPO to be able to deliver their service. Neither does the NPO status help with the management of funding. It was just one of the unnecessary red tape burdens that's a legacy of ECD being part of a social development paradigm before.
As always asked the question about why they had to do it. And I mean, this always gets back to the question of why they were under social development in the first place. It took a long time to move them to basic education.
Yeah, well, the ECD was seen as a childcare function historically, and it was always nested with that understanding within the Department of Social Development about children being loved, cared for, protected. The phenomenon, the understanding of ECD from a development context came across quite later, and it's only the past 5 or maybe the past 10 years that people understand the actual development and thriving opportunity that ECD provides children. And as we know, social development is in the welfare space. Their span of understanding is around NPO status. So again, I think it was largely just a legacy reason that ECDs were within the Department of Social Development and why the NPO requirement was there. That's just how things were done back then.
There can be, of course, complications. I mean, most people, as you say, in the sector will welcome this. But could it be more difficult for ECDs now to get subsidies or to get funding generally?
So from a government perspective, and we feel the government is obligated to be able to provide poor children with funding to get access to early childhood development services. Parents just cannot afford these fees in low-income communities. So by removing something like an NPO requirement for funding opens up the doors. I mean, I'll give you a numerical example. There's about 91,000 providers at this point, 9,100 ECD providers at this point in time, serving poor children who are not registered as NPOs. So just by taking away that NPO requirement, those 9,100 providers can actually be eligible and access funding. There are no complications with removing the NPO status requirement because how funding is dispersed, how funding is monitored and managed is not through the NPO system, but through other types of mechanisms. It's really just a case of reducing unnecessary red tape for an ECD provider to be able to create access for as many poor children as possible.